Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we are going to listen about an inflation about the country that we have choose. Firstly, inflation is a continuous increase in the general price level of goods and services in the economy. We are choosing the inflation at Venezuela as our study country. The causes of inflation at Venezuela. Firstly, we need to know that Venezuela is one of the world's largest oil deposits. Once the 1980s rolled in, oil prices stabilized. People start looking for more affordable alternative energy methods. This was detrimental to Venezuela's economy since there was less demand for oil. The price of oil continued to drop as the years progressed. Inflation in Venezuela began here as the nation struggled to adapt in the face of failing exports. There are several factors contribute to the inflation of the Venezuelan bolivar. One factor was increased spending on social welfare programs and the importation of basic goods during Hugo Chavez's presidency. While these actions helped to alleviate social unrest, this type of spending couldn't be sustained as the oil-based economy tanked. In 2008, the global price of oil dropped to around $34 per barrel, a record low that severely cut Venezuela's core income. In 2014, another record low sealed Venezuela's economic down spiral as the nation could no longer rely on its chief export for a means of financial stability. However, this did not deter spending on welfare programs and imports, which led the nation into deficit spending. Deficit spending continues to be a major factor in increasing inflation in Venezuela. The further the nation falls into debt, the more the value of the bolivar depreciates. Currently, the full value of Venezuela's debt exceeds the value of its exports by 738%. Because of its massive debt, the US implements trade restrictions in early 2019. This has further decreased the sales from exports and the nation's gross revenue. The last causes is currency printing. Currency printing has been another cause of inflation in Venezuela. In order to pay for the importation of basic goods, more money has been printed by banks and the government. The value of the bolivar depreciates the more that is printed. That's that for the causes inflation in Venezuela. Now we continue our presentation with effect inflation on Venezuela that will be presented by Sophie.
Hi, today I want to talk about effect inflation on country. So, the phenomenon of inflation gave many damage to a country, especially in Venezuela. Inflation gave many effects to this country. The effect to Venezuela were the recent development in Venezuela economy, social and political circumstance, highlighting the role of distributive conflict, balance of payment, constraint, expectation and flight from domestic currency to foreign currency as proposed in theoretical framework. So, the inflation in Venezuela also give effect to the role of oil, Dutch disease and collapse in private investment. The defining features of the Venezuela economy is it heavily relies on oil rents, which has shaped its economic and social policies and influenced considerably most of the macroeconomic outcome in the country during the past decade. The discovery of oil in 20th century enabled Venezuela to experience its golden year. However, oil revenue started fall in the late 1970s, which reduced considerably the source of export and fiscal revenue. We will argue that the main explanation behind such a dramatic shift in economic development in the phenomenon of the resource curse or Dutch disease, which postulates that abundant natural resources can harm the prospect of economic development. Since the 1970s, Venezuela has been struggling with many symptoms of the Dutch disease: the over-reliance on oil exports and incapacity to develop other export sectors and move resources to alternative industry is put forward by Hausman and Rodriguez as one of the main factors explaining that collapse in economic growth following in the late 1970s crisis. The fall in productivity can also be explained by the collapse of private investment since the end of 1970s. While the over-accumulation arguments can have some merit in explaining the very rapid increase in private investment from the early 1970s and its consequent collapse in the late 1970s. So it cannot explain the very low price investment level that followed in the 1980, 1990 and early 2000. We will argue below that the low level of investment persisted mainly due to the overvalued real exchange rate, a consequence of the Dutch disease. Next, the neoliberal adjustment, banking crisis and change in the exchange rate policy. Runaway inflation has decimated Venezuela as the value of money and wages has become worth less and less. The despair on the population has deepened. While Venezuela was able to avoid the IMF intervention during the 1983 crisis, the following macroeconomic disequilibria in the late 1980s, prioritization of internal debt repayment and growing private capital flight forced the country to finally make an adjustment in 1989. The result of the adjustment were disastrous and led to a reduction in real wage, high income concentration, dramatic fall in private investment and deterioration in living conditions. The deterioration in the political system and deepening political crisis, coupled with low oil prices, led to more economic problems under President Caldera, who took office in 1994. Just as the new government came to the power, a financial crisis erupted in January 1994 with the bankruptcy of one of the largest banks, the Banco Latino. With the many financial institutions affected, there was large capital flight despite the central bank implementing very restrictive monetary policy. Okay, that's all for me. Thank you.
Inflation in Venezuela affected the Venezuelans greatly. Due to the rising inflation rate, the Venezuelans had to struggle in order to survive the high cost living situations. As we know, every living person has to pay a lot in order to continue their daily life, such as buying foods, paying bills, and school fees. But for the Venezuelans, due to the inflation, their minimum wage were barely enough to provide food for their whole family. Therefore, if any health emergencies were to happen, they absolutely cannot afford to pay for the medical bills. Situation became worse when unemployment rate were rising and even reached 35%. Eventually, employers could not afford to pay for the employees' wages and some workers had to be fired. The only economically active population belongs to the informal sector, which provide low salary, which also not enough to afford anything. On top of that, suicidal attempts among Venezuelans were rapidly rising. Some of the Venezuelans were extremely stressed to the situation which they cannot afford to pay anything and risking everything such as their health, finance, and education. Venezuelans seem to be taken over by a feeling of hopelessness by the inflation that occurred. Due to the difficulty to survive, around 4.8 million Venezuelans were registered due to refugees and migrants. A lot of people choose to move to foreign countries to live comfortably. Therefore, children were able to further their studies and adults are able to get a job and receive income regularly. This shows us about how inflation affected people in Venezuela. Next, Nurin Batisha will present about solution on the inflation in Venezuela.
Now, I will present to you on how Venezuela solved their inflation problems in their country using a policy. Before that, we need to know what is the type of policy available and what is the policy means. Basically, there are two types of policy, which are monetary policy and fiscal policy. As in Venezuela, they use monetary policy in order to solve their inflation problems. Monetary policy is the policy adopted by the monetary authority of a country that controls either interest rate payable on very short-term borrowing or the money supply, often targeting inflation or the interest rate to ensure the price stability and general trust in the currency. Monetary policy aims to manipulate the money supply, such as printing more money or decreasing the money supply by changing interest rate or removing excess reserve. Other goals of monetary policy are usually to contribute to the stability of gross domestic product, or known as GDP. In Venezuela, monetary programming models have been adopted by the central banks of Venezuela, or known as the BCV, as an instrument to improve the efficiency of monetary policy in the country. Its use has entailed the selection of an intermediate variable, preferably a monetary aggregate, which guides policy in the process of influencing a final target variable, such as rates of inflation. The most important policy that changed was the government decision to allow interest rate to fluctuate with the market rates. Despite the initial inflationary effect, the policy created a lot of incentive for savings and investment, thereby attracting and retaining the capital in the country. This deposit noticeably swelled during the year 1989. In 2018, Venezuela's monetary policy was tailored to facilitate the financing of public sector management, as reflected by the significant increase in net domestic assets linked to the public sector, especially non-financial public enterprise, which grew 25.5 times the growth of monetary pace. On the other hand, nominal interest rates have remained very stable. In 2019, the BCV has attempted to rein in the growth of broad monetary aggregates by altering the ordinary and marginal reserve ratios. The former was raised from its January 2019 level of 31% to 57% from February, while the marginal reserve ratios, which has been increasing since October 2018, was raised from 60% in January 2019 in 200% in February 2019. In conclusion, the monetary policy that was used by the government is a low interest rates to fluctuate with market rates, the monetary policy tailored to facilitate the financing of public sector management, and rein in growth of broad monetary aggregates by altering the ordinary and marginal reserve ratios. Next, Afika will present to you about the conclusion of these inflation problems in Venezuela.
In conclusion, the inflation problem in Venezuela has affected the Venezuelans badly. Not only to the people of Venezuela, the inflation also affected the country itself. Venezuela's economy, which originally known as one of the richest economies in South America, turned to the brink of financial ruin. Fortunately, monetary policy was applied in order to control the situation from getting worse.